Welcome to the Guilbault Girls Show, where you will have the opportunity to hear from mothers, fathers, siblings, and individuals themselves about their journey of living with a disability. I know, it's called Guilbault Girls, but we have a bonus for you as we get the Guilbault boys to interview some of the dads and siblings to get their perspectives too. We'll also have special guests from time to time to share the many resources that are available to those living with a disability and their families. So get ready to laugh, smile, cry, maybe even get a little angry when you hear some of those stories of their day-to-day struggles. But let's not forget their many triumphs. As they say, it takes a village, and if it weren't for our village, we wouldn't be where we are today. So join us. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Guilbault Girls Show. I'm your host, Karen Guilbault, and joining us again today is Lauren Neubauer. If you missed our previous interview on self-care and mental well-being, be sure to go back and take a listen. So many nuggets of great information in there. So Lauren is a mom and board-certified behavior analyst who has 15 plus years of professional experience in human services. She has passion for expanding her knowledge personally and professionally, and she is proud to say that she is one of the few BCBAs who has supported people through the lifespan. Most recently, she's been using her education and experience to spread the use of positive behavior supports through the workplace, community, and home. She's a member of the Association of Positive Behavior Support and Home and Community Positive Behavior Support Committees. So before we jump in, can you expand a little bit more on what your role is as a behavioral analyst?
Yes.
What
So,
it is?
the easiest way I define it is I get paid to watch people.
Ooh, you're a people watcher, are
I'm
you?
watcher paid. But really what it means, and to be a board certified behavior analyst means that I've passed graduate level coursework, and then I passed a board exam, and that I adhere to ongoing licensure requirements that our board requires. So for me, it meant that I got a graduate degree. I have my master's in counseling psychology. And I knew before grad school that I wanted to be part of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, because I had been working with children as a behavior technician, but that is a bachelor's level. So I knew I needed my graduate degree, and I knew that I wanted to do the concentration that ended up being advanced applied behavior analysis. But so it's a counseling degree or psychology, or I think you can even have education, a master's in education. But then there's a specialty in there, applied behavior analysis, just like there would be a specialty for family and family counselors, marriage counselors, sex counselors, or substance abuse counselors. So applied behavior analysis is just one of those specialties.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And so behavior analysis, and I had to do a shout out to my board. So behavior analysis is the science of behavior with a history extending back to the early 20th century. Its guiding philosophy is behaviorism, which is based on the premise that attempts to improve the human condition through behavior change. So thinking of education, behavioral health treatment, and that it will be most effective if behavior itself is the primary focus. So with that philosophy, applied behavior analysis is we literally take that philosophy and we apply it to humans or animals. And
there's what made you pick humans?
Man,
is that a whole nother episode?
A whole nother. One of my research projects was actually on one of my cats in grad school. Yeah, because it's training, right? Yeah. So is education. It's just education for an animal. The training that we do to work with Honor, the therapy dog. Mm-hmm. That's behavior analysis.
For those of you that didn't watch the first episode first, so she works at the Arc Northern Chesapeake region, and Honor is the therapy dog.
Yeah. Yes. Now that's not necessarily, strict applied behavior analysis, but they all use the same philosophy. So that's kind of where I am. I will say, there's a lot more than just supporting people with autism or developmental disabilities. You can use behavior analysis for sports psychology, health and fitness, substance abuse, brain injury rehab, organizational behavior management, which is kind of what I did do at the ARC with the agency-wide positive behavior support. And then there's public health and environmental sustainability. So it's anywhere there's a human, you can use ABA.
That's crazy. See, and I didn't know that. What made you go into the field with helping people with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
So honestly, the first boy that I ever babysat was on the spectrum.
Okay.
And so to me, being able to take care of him meant I had to, really do what he needed. I needed to be individualized. I couldn't go in and be like, oh, like this should be working. And so really I took that lens. I was 13 years old, I think, at the time.
Wow.
And it was just on the wave of Western Pennsylvania. And there was a big increase in people getting autism diagnoses. And really people didn't know about this. But I will say, so being able to individually support people was always an interest, even as far as like, I was a camp counselor and they say there's 10 campers in my cabin. Every single one of them needed something different. And so I think being able to identify that at a young age and then help them problem solve what they need and how they can get it. Yeah, I think that's kind of why I got into it.
So can you tell us what is positive behavior support, PBS?
Sure. So PBS falls under applied behavior analysis. A lot of times it's also referred to as PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports. And if you have a child in school or you went through elementary and high school recently, middle school, your school probably used PBIS because it is a proactive approach to cueing safe, appropriate, and desired behaviors from people. And so what they learned, probably the hard way through the American education system, is that when you only tell people what they're doing wrong, it doesn't really cue any sort of safer behavior. So what we need to do is we need to set them up for success. We need to tell them what we want to see and be very clear about what we expect and then catch them when they do it. That's when we're reinforcing it. We want to give all the time and attention to reinforcing the desired behavior and then have a consistent consequence when something negative or something challenging or interfering does happen. And so positive behavior support really came out of that mindset. I always think, because I need to associate things to my own life. When I was in kindergarten, and I have permission to share this story, but I had a peer named Chaz, and Chaz was the first person. So again, I'm 5, 6 at the time. The first person I knew who had something called ADD. And so his mind is going, in retrospect, I'm assuming it was ADHD. But he was one of those kids where the teacher would be like, no running. Well, his mind didn't process the no, and he would most often do the opposite. No hitting, no, like the rule chart at school, elementary school, was always no gum chewing, no, all of the no's.
So true.
And it led to a very punitive setting. And research has shown that that's not how people learn. They need to be reinforced when they're doing things appropriately. And so that is where PBS comes from. And it's been used in public schools now for decades. I will say there's a big push right now in adult services for human service providers to use positive behavior support with adults. But it's something that a lot of people use on a daily basis, and they just think, oh, that's being a good person.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
is, but it's also then being a good person for other people.
Right. Yeah. Can you share with us some of the strategies of positive behavior supports?
Yeah. So I said, in my house right now where I'm sitting, I can see 3 or 4 different positive behavior support strategies from right here. I have my calendar out. I have my refrigerator where we hang all of the important information from school. And I can see my keys on the hook by the front door because I want to know where they are for tomorrow. And these are all proactive antecedent strategies to use to make sure that myself for tomorrow, I'm going to succeed. I'm going to know where my keys are. I'm going to know what my schedule is. And I'm going to remember, to put Layla's, ice pack in the freezer or whatever it might be. So the strategies are not necessarily blanket because we all have different needs and our families all have different needs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really using like the proactive approach to those things. And then the proactive approach. And then I'm a visual person.
Mm-hmm.
That's another strategy. So using visuals or even alarms. I don't know how many times I've set my phone alarm.
I'll set my phone alarms and then I'll put in the little thing where you can label. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, and then my reminder list. And then Jesse's like, what's this? And I'm like, I gave you permission for my calendar. I'm like, you know where I am, what I'm doing. I'm like, look at it. Don't ask me 5 million times.
Yeah. But even today, like I was at work and I took a picture of the calendar and there was a couple people who had been using it because yes, I know like we put our time off into a system to request time off. But it's also good communication to write it on the dry erase calendar so everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I praise the people who had put their days off in on the calendar already because that shows me a proactive approach to communicating like, hey, I'm going to be off. I love it. I appreciate it. And it's something, again, this is universal. It's a workplace or it's a family. Again, we color code our schedule here. So when your medical appointments are, your date nights are, school visits, IEP meetings, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But it is that proactive strategy that is most effective.
And we kind of did cover, about some of the different benefits, of positive behavior supports.
Yeah.
Can you give us some insight into why people behave the way they do?
Oh. So human behavior, again, I always say human behavior because most of what I've taught people, especially in the past 5 years, is not unique to people with disabilities. This is human behavior. It doesn't matter if they have a diagnosis of this, that, or the other thing. Human behavior is human behavior because it is completely maintained by the environment that we're in. So I don't know, Karen, if you have ever seen someone, say, at work who's very different in a professional setting than they are at home with their family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a different environment there. But also, it's important to know that every single human operates in a world where there are 4 functions. So there's 4 functions of behavior. So that means our behavior gets us or gets us away from one of these 4 categories. Tangible. So that's obtaining something that we want, tangible. Escape. We get away from something we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Attention. We get attention or sometimes away from negative attention.
Mm-hmm.
And sensory, meaning there is an internal automatic reaction our body has to something in the environment. And so depending on what function maintains your behavior is how someone will act. What I do like is that there are people like myself who are trained to break that down, but we don't break it down in a way that is clinical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This has to be broken down into functional, usable ways because we're working with families and we're working with the general public. And so there's no need for throwing around like big research jargon. No, if someone asks me like, hey, why is this person doing it? And we go through the questionnaires and I do my observations, I'm going to be able to tell you in plain English, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they did that because.
Mm-hmm.
And so just know that it's human behavior, and there's probably one, if not more, of those four functions that is why we do the way, or why we do what we do.
Yeah. Okay, so what is a positive behavior? Well, okay, so this is like a 4-part question, girl. I had it as a 3-part, and then I just kind of put it together as a 4-part. Okay, here we go. All right, so what is a positive behavior support plan? Where can a positive behavior support plan be used? Who should use it? And why would they need one? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So a positive behavior support plan is a plan in writing that applies a strategy, hopefully one that we're able to
And you can
use.
even give an example if that makes it easier to explain it.
Sure. But it's a plan. So it's like a blueprint.
Okay.
The blueprint. And so positive behavior support plan is a blueprint in which we would be eliminating triggers and using a lot of those proactive strategies to build relationships and honor communication, and then gives you a consistent way to respond if a behavior that interferes with health, safety, and or community inclusion occurs. So I always say a support plan can be used for any single human being that is struggling with changing their behavior. And so, Karen, if you came to me and you're like, I want to stop, I don't know, I want to stop going out to eat so much.
Okay.
Okay. Say, you're just
I was
something
gonna say
about
stop peeing, but I didn't think that you would be able to.
that's a thing.
I know it's a medical thing. Go ahead.
But yes, so anybody that wants to change their own behavior, but most often, and it is because of funding, these are plans that are given to people who demonstrate behaviors that are unsafe, unhealthy, or prevent them from being part of their community. Okay. So, for example, when I was working for the ARC NCR, DDA paid for those services. And so the agency would provide them and get reimbursed from DDA. In a school system, these are called behavior intervention plans. So again, it's a blueprint on how you would stop negative behaviors from happening. But because we call it a positive behavior support plan, what we're actually doing is building those adaptive replacement behaviors. So I'm like, okay, let me give you an example. So I have a learner right now who is using aggression and self-injury, biting herself and hitting and pinching others to get out of the group setting. So every time it's carpet time, she comes over and she has a tantrum. My job is to identify, number one, and we've done an assessment. This is an escape maintained behavior. She does not want to go to group. She doesn't like being in a circle. She doesn't now. It's not as specific as, oh, she doesn't like it because X, Y, and Z, but we know that this is a trigger for her. So my job is to identify what is the safe replacement for that. So instead of showing me with her teeth that she doesn't want to come to group, asking for a break or telling the person, telling my staff, I'm not ready. So that falls under communication. So requesting a break or, requesting a delay, or just saying, like, for some kids, it's, It might not be an escape, or it is an escape, but it's not the group that they don't like. It's that they don't want to sit on the carpet because it feels weird, right? So we offer a chair, and then all of a sudden, tantrum goes away. But so it is my job and the job of not, behavior analysts and registered behavior technicians to identify the safe replacement and then teach that. So that's kind of where we'd be using one, why someone would need it. I'll be very honest. I use unofficial behavior support plans for people in my life all the time. Right. So I was married and I used behavior analysis all the time. I was changing variables, or I was ignoring something. If I thought like they were doing it for attention, then I would just, ignore what they were saying and then, redirect. But again, this is human behavior. So anybody can technically use it, but the people who typically pay for it tend to be these state agencies like DDA, insurance companies. So it is one of the insurance companies' covered services for children who have autism diagnoses.
Okay.
Now, again, it's beneficial to all children who are demonstrating any sort of behavior that interfere with health, safety, or community inclusion, but insurances will only cover it if there's an autism diagnosis.
Wow.
In Maryland. Now, that's not to say,
right. Right.
The state, I have the top 3 states, in my opinion, to live in if your child has autism, and Maryland is not one of them.
So what are the good ones?
So I would say, again, I'm partial Pennsylvania.
Okay.
In the Penn State, and their state system and their Medicaid does wonders. You get a diagnosis, you get 20 hours of in-home ABA, and that is to teach your parents the skills that they need to really become better caregivers. And a lot of parents end up going into the field of behavior analysis because this worked. I saw the result, and I can do this for other kids and other families. So Pennsylvania, Florida, and Arizona, just again, based on what the state does and the benefits that they have as far as being able to get ABA. But Maryland's coming along. Insurances are covering it now. So that's big. That's different than 10 years ago.
Okay, so what are the best ways to engage caregivers to take an active role in behavioral intervention?
So I always find it easiest to make sure that they have a role in developing any plan I make. Because I can make the best plan, the best blueprint, but if they can't read my handwriting, it's going to be pointless. If they're not bought into what I'm doing, it's pointless. So a lot of this goes into when plans are made or assessments are done, I'm building a relationship. I'm finding out what the parents like, what they dislike. I had a conversation during a parent training last month, and I said, what's your most favorite thing about your kid? And she was like, nobody has ever asked me that. Right? Because we want to know what they can't do, or, the insurance company wants to know what their deficits are, what milestones they're not meeting. But for you to want to change your own behavior, because that's what a plan does. It actually changes the parents or the staff or whoever's, around the person. It changes our behavior, not the person. Yeah. So making sure that they have a role in developing that. And then explaining the why. And so I think that's one of the benefits I have now as someone who has supported through the lifespan, from birth/diagnosis through end of life, is you see a difference, a stark difference in the people who had early intervention and those who didn't.
Yeah.
Whether it was speech, language, OT, PT, feeding, all of those things, ABA, making sure that I'm able to share the why. So yeah, today it just happened again. little girl was all snuggly with a little boy, and it was so sweet because they actually were interacting with each other. And I said, but we need to shape that now. So we're not going to stop them. We're not going to rip them apart and be like, no, that's bad. But do you want her to do that to the store clerk that's checking her out at Walmart?
Yeah.
No. So being able to share that why is really important. Because again, this is lifelong for these people.
Yeah.
And I want to teach them it now when their brains are soft and spongy and picking up all the good things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here we go with like another couple part question. Okay. Can you well, actually you kind of did. You've done a few of them. Can you describe a situation when you assisted an individual recognize that he or she had several choices and how to handle a difficult problem? What was the situation? What did you do? And what was the final outcome?
Yeah. So, yeah, there's been a couple examples, but I like to go back to one of my adult examples. So, again, supporting someone, an adult, um, who was really on the fence on if she wanted to smoke cigarettes or not. Okay. And so, every human being has choice. Um, and so, I actually walked her through what's called informed decision making. And I know
Mhm.
that's, again, something I've learned in the past 5 years, but I use it all the time now. So informed decision making is it's this person's choice whether they smoke or not.
Mhm.
My personal opinion, yeah, they might want to take into account, but at the end of the day, if this person decides to smoke, they're the one living with that consequence, not me.
Mhm.
So I like to, kind of understand like okay, what's the situation? Okay, this person decides or she's, deciding whether or not she wants to buy a pack of cigarettes. And then I start to ask more questions like, well, why? Have you smoked before? Do you know how much cigarettes cost?
Yeah, nowadays.
Do you know what the health benefits or the health risks are to that? They answer the questions. Does anybody else smoke? And that's when I actually light bulb moment was she said, my boyfriend smokes and I want him to love me. And so we had that conversation of, do you think that he could love you if you didn't smoke? Well, yeah, he likes me now. He loves me now. So, okay. So it's up to you. But it sounds like to me, you're really worried about your relationship and you want him to love you. Um, but you think he can love you without smoking, but it's your choice. You can, buy the cigarettes or not. And I'm here to support you no matter what. So she ended up choosing to not buy the cigarettes. But the next time I saw her, I asked, I said, whatever happened with that? Um, and she said, well, I didn't buy any cigarettes and I don't want to smoke ever. Did you know it causes cancer? And I was like, yes, actually, that is one of those health risks I was asking you about. I'm glad and I'm proud of you for, handling the situation in a way that you wanted to. Not that it was the way I wanted her to, but
Right.
she would follow through, on her own accord. But yeah, so again, sometimes people just need help breaking a situation down because not everybody was taught to make a pros and a cons list, or, some people do react to situations instead of respond. And so being able to just take a minute and have a conversation about something
Mhm.
um, can help provide people with some insight.
What would be the top 3 changes to make to support positive behavior?
Mm. All right. Clear expectations.
Mm.
So, and I think schools have it right when they have a rule chart and they have it displayed visually, but it needs to be stated in positive ways. So instead of no running, walk in the hallway.
Mhm.
Instead of, whatever it is, no hitting at school, we have safe hands, or instead of, all of the no's, what is the positive that you want? And I ask staff all the time, especially when working with smaller children, what does it look like? Describe that to me. What does being safe at school look like?
Mhm.
Because once we identify that, then we can shape it. But if being safe looks different to me than it does to you,
Mhm.
we need to really figure this out. So those clear expectations. And again, at home, my expectation for one kid is the same as two kids. Everybody has the same expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Because the minute that those expectations start to get skewed, that's when problem behaviors happen. So everybody, we're very clear about the expectations. And sometimes it's just unwritten expectations. So we have to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Well, I expected you to bring dinner home. You knew it was Monday and I wasn't going to be able to cook. Well, I'm sorry. That was not what I expected. I expected us to. And so sometimes you have to really clear up what those expectations are. Okay. Visual supports. I am a visual person, and I swear most people, it might not always be words. It might not be words on a chart, but maybe it's a little image, or maybe it's, I always think of the dentist office, right? With those motivational things on the ceiling.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Or I also like the saying, like, have the kind of day you deserve, because if I'm not being a very nice person, maybe I don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Have the kind of day that I deserve. And then my third is to have clear consequences and to respond consistently. So family wise, good example is, my brother would come home after curfew, no problem. I would come home late from curfew and I would be grounded. Mm-hmm. Those consequences were not consistent. Mm-hmm. I could go to my dad's house and get away with a whole lot more than I could at my mom's house. Mm-hmm. So again, knowing families is that we have to have a clear consequence and we need to respond consistently. And this goes for anybody. I think of a coworker, supervisor, boss, right? If I'm okay with John and Leo coming in 20 minutes late, but I'm not okay with Barb coming in late, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Right? And if I'm responding to, one of them and not all of them in a certain way, then that's a problem. So clear consequences, and that we respond to them consistently.
Okay. Before we wrap up, is there any advice that you would like to share? Or words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom.
As my dog sits there and...
I love it. Cleans his bum. That's all right. It's that time of night. I think basically what I want advice-wise is that there are resources out there. I'd like to share that. So there are resources out there, whether it is human behavior, if it's human behavior, if it's something you're ashamed to admit, or something, I don't want anybody to know that this is happening. There are HIPAA protected, agencies out there where you can reach out for resources anonymously and get help, but also that there are places like the ARC NCR where you can get family support with or without disabilities, kids or adults, or, older generations. So there are resources out there. I think that's one thing. And then also that it's never too late to change, I guess. So it doesn't matter if you've been parenting for 5 years one way. If you decide, okay, no, tomorrow, you know what? We're going to make some positive changes. We're going to do it as a family. It's never too late to start over. And so I think that it kind of goes hand in hand with my conversation about self-care, but it takes 3 minutes a day for 21 days to develop a habit. And so just remember that if you give your energy to the positive and you give your energy to what you want to see more of, then you're going to see it a lot more too. They always say, like, if you're looking for a yellow car, you're going to see a yellow car. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're looking for the good out there, or you're looking for the positive, you're going to see it a lot more. And so just give yourself a chance to do that.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time out to do not one, but 2 episodes for the podcast. I miss seeing everybody.
No, I do too.
I know. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I will see you on another episode. So have a great one. Bye. Thank you for joining us as we spread awareness through our personal stories and the many resources shared. You can help us by joining our village simply by sharing our show with the masses. You can also become a supporter of the show by clicking on the link in the show notes. Your funds will allow us to keep sharing these valuable, heartfelt stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe to our Guilbault Girls podcast and YouTube show, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Guilbault Girls.